Hello everyone and welcome back to the Behind the Lore podcast, where we would talk with the developers and creators of some of the biggest games, shows and films within the industry and get to know a bit more about what went into these worlds and how they were made. I'm your host WiseFish, also known as Matt, and today I'm joined by a very special guest named Jonah Loeb, who is responsible for the creation of some of the monsters in two of my favourite franchises, Fallout and Elder Scrolls, and has a new project that I absolutely love to pieces. So I hope you enjoy this chat with him, and if you do enjoy this podcast, make sure you give it a like and subscribe and let me know in the comments as well. And if you are listening on Spotify or any other podcast app, please give it a rating and let me know what you think as well. But with that all said, let's get into the chat with Mr. Jonah Loeb. Thank you for joining us. Today I am joined by Jonah Loeb, who is a character artist who has worked on some massive franchises of Fallout and Elder Scrolls with Bethesda, and now is working on his own project named Quiet Level 1, which is a fantastic graphic novel if you haven't heard about it already. So thank you for joining me, Jonah, and can you just give us a brief introduction about who you are, your previous work, and what you kind of do now?
Totally. So my name is Jonah Loeb. I've been an artist and world builder in the entertainment industry for 20 years now. I started my career at Bethesda Softworks kind of just as they were just starting to hit the mainstream. My first project I ever worked on was Oblivion: The Shivering Isles and the expansion packs to Oblivion. And then I moved from there to Fallout 3, where I created most of the monsters that you see in the game. And then I went from there to Skyrim, where again, I created most of the monsters that you see in the game, including the dragons and the giants and the Draugr and the mammoth, etc. And then I moved over to Fallout 4, where I got to create a handful of characters and world art pieces or character art pieces until I left halfway through the project to move here to New York, which is where I live now. I thought I'd be only leaving for about a year to work on a fantasy novel. The novel took 3.5 years. And I did get an agent. We could never find a house, a place to publish for it, but that's okay. And since then, I've moved on kind of in a freelance capacity, and I've kind of left behind the world of 3D design. I still do it a little bit. But nowadays, I'm much more exploring the route of concept art, illustration, and now comics. And so my most recent project was called Marvel Anatomy. That was a book that was released in October 2022. And it's basically Marvel's one and only biological compendium of over 60 heroes and villains, showing through cutaway images kind of how they do what they do through their anatomical differences. And that was the most recent project I'm working on. And then, as you say, now I'm working on my own project and launching my own IP, Quiet Level 1.
Nice. I saw the Marvel stuff. I wasn't quite sure the details of it. So it looks at each character's differences and how that works.
Precisely. Yeah. So showing the insides of the Hulk, his muscle fibers, his bones, how does he suddenly put on all this mass and then get rid of it suddenly? All the kind of questions that you have about how these superheroes function. That's what this book seeks to answer. That's so it's all those questions that you had when you were little. Oh, how does so and so do this? How does so and so do this? Well, now this is the kind of book that gives you the answers in a series of very detailed illustrations by me. And yeah.
That's awesome. I got a friend who does that kind of thing on YouTube. He's a scientist, Roanoke Gaming, and he dives into does this infection actually exists in the real world, and if it did, what would it actually do? So I'll show him that book. I think he'll be very interested.
You should. I think I know Roanoke Gaming. Yeah. That's awesome.
He does a lot of stuff involving science. So yeah, he's very interesting. But anyway, so how did you get into art and design? What was your, I suppose, first professional job?
Honestly, my first professional job within the industry was Bethesda. I applied once between my junior and senior year of college and never heard back. I applied again after college with my new resume and portfolio, and I never heard back. And so then I spent, 9 months working on my portfolio, just trying to get it up to snuff, trying to show that I could do the job. I'd also applied to other places, but I'd never heard back from anywhere. And then I applied one last time to Bethesda, and this time I sent my resume in directly to Todd Howard, which I don't think would work these days.
No.
Because now everyone knows him as God Howard, but at the time he was just some guy who I'd never heard of before. And I sent my portfolio directly into him, and I followed it up 2 days later via an email. Hello, Mr. Howard. I hope I just, I'm a big fan. I sent him my portfolio. Keep an eye out for it. And he wrote me back 20 minutes later, and then had an art test ready for me to go. So, and that's how I got my first gig in the industry. I did an art test. I did a raider from Fallout, what was soon to be Fallout 3.
That's incredible. I can't imagine just reaching out to just emailing people like that.
No. Well, I had no idea, how to get an in of any kind, and so they were promoting Oblivion at the time, and so they were doing a series of developer diaries where different people on the team would kind of describe their job, and they'd put it up on the website. And before the real rise of social media, this is how companies got in touch and maintained relationships with their communities. And there's this one guy, Gary, who was something called a character artist. Turned out he was an animator, but I was like, oh, character artist, that sounds like what I want to do. And so I just cold called the company and said, can I speak to Gary, please? and there was some hesitation. They're like, does he know who you are? And I was like, he's not expecting my call, but I think he would like to talk to me. And he surprised me. He talked to me, and he was the one who suggested I bypass HR and send my portfolio directly in to Todd. And so again, I don't think it would work now, but at the time, I just hit it right at the right time, and I managed to talk to the right guy and get it sent into the right place. And I figured the worst what would happen is that he would not like my stuff, and then I wouldn't get the job, but that would be the case anyway. And the best that would happen is that he would like it, and then he would reach back out, and he did.
And exactly what happened. So it's prime example of, if you want something, you just got to go for it and hope that it pans out. So that's amazing.
Yes, exactly. There's the kind of that boomer advice of like, oh, just put on a nice tie and go in there and shake hands and make eye contact,
Yeah.
But which doesn't really work anymore. But there's iterations of that where there's always somebody that you should be speaking to, and whatever you have to do to find out who that person is, that's what you got to do. Yeah.
Exactly. So obviously you wanted to work with Bethesda or as part of their team. Was there a reason why Bethesda, or was it because of that Oblivion thing that you watched, or were you a big fan of the games? Had you played the Fallouts before Bethesda took out, or were you a big Elder Scrolls fan or something like that?
I had played the Fallouts, at a friend's house. My parents would never let me get violent video games.
Yeah.
So I had this one friend, Seitu, and I would go to his house and do sleepovers on the weekends sometimes. And he had Fallout, and so I would play Fallout there. And I was not familiar with Bethesda until about around the year 2000. When I was in college, and I was hankering for a good RPG to play. The big one a couple years before that had been Final Fantasy VII. But I didn't have a gaming system because, again, my parents wouldn't get me a gaming system. But I had played a little something called Baldur's Gate 2 back in my freshman year, and that had blown my little mind. And I wanted something that would help me relive that experience. So I looked up top 10, top 20 best RPGs. And I kept seeing pictures of Morrowind. And yes, it looked nothing like Baldur's Gate, and it played nothing like Baldur's Gate, but it was the first time I'd ever heard the phrase open world game. And the art style was so weird that it caught my eye. And that's something I value. I value originality. I value an original vision of something. And Morrowind had a very strange aesthetic that seemed to set it apart from everything else. And it didn't seem like it didn't seem afraid to be weird. So I admit, when I started seeing things about Oblivion, I thought two things. One, that game looks beautiful. Look at that beautiful lighting and all these things. And then the second thing I thought was, it doesn't look nearly as weird as Morrowind. That's kind of a letdown. But I still went for it. And so that's what put them on the map. Is I started playing Morrowind and I became obsessed with it. And I thought to myself, this is somewhere I want to work.
Absolutely. Do you think that, because you said you worked on the first DLC for Oblivion, do you think that seeing Morrowind and its art style, its weird, wacky art style, which I admit to even to this day, that art style is so unique for Morrowind that you still don't really see it. Even in Elder Scrolls Online, you get that element of it, but there was something so unique about Morrowind. Do you think that inspires you when you were creating things in that DLC at all?
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Definitely. I mean, I didn't take direct reference from Morrowind at that point, but I think, the concept artist at the time, Adam Adamowicz, we had cubicles back to back, and his cubicles were just full of art for the Shivering Isles, and he was constantly working on it, and it was so weird. And I think that really, and it added this, like, these bright flashes of paint and color and inspiration to an otherwise relatively Lord of the Rings style
Mhm.
art style. And so it certainly enlivened things for me. The strangeness of it all was really intriguing. And for a first project, I couldn't have asked for something better. Yeah.
I can imagine it. I still remember playing that for the first time and then thinking it was such a good DLC.
It
I
was. It
really
was. It
loved
was.
it.
It was. It was one of the best DLCs I think games,
Yeah,
you know, had. I mean, it was just. It took everything you liked about the original, expanded on it, gave you a whole new world space, a very colorful cast, a very intriguing story, um, and a lush new environment to explore. I think it was great. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree. And some fantastic voice acting from the main guy, who was
Oh
brilliant.
yeah, who I'm actually friends with.
Oh, really?
He's
Wow.
yeah, he Wes Johnson. He
That's a,
I'm trying to get him to do a little promo for Quiet Level 1, actually, and I think he's going to do it
oh,
maybe
nice.
this week even. But yeah, he's also the announcer for the Washington Capitals, which is our hockey team in
No way.
back in yeah. So he's a bit of a local celebrity there. Yeah, no, he's great. He's great. And I got to design the three-headed gate with the
Oh,
three heads of Sheogorath. That's one of the first things I ever did there.
yeah.
And I later took that design into Skyrim and created what we now known as the Wabbajack, the modern,
Oh, yeah.
the modern aesthetic of the Wabbajack. The designers didn't have any idea for what that was and what it was could be. And one of them just said, you can just take inspiration from your work in Shivering Isles. And so I did a three-headed staff. And now, whenever I run into Wes at conferences, he's got his three-headed Wabbajack. It's cool.
That's
Yeah.
so amazing. It must feel so
Yeah.
weird just seeing that in real life, knowing that you
It
spent
is.
a good while probably working on that.
It is. It's very weird. It's very fun. Yeah, it's the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, I don't know, not all your fans can see this, but you can see I've got multiple dragon priests on the wall.
Yeah.
I've got I've got an ancient Nord helm up there.
Oh,
Um,
so cool.
I'm a, I've got a bunch of good, fun, nerdy stuff from those days.
I can see the dragon as well, and the one of the
Yeah.
I can't remember what they're called. The where you find the shout words and everything.
Yes, the word walls, is that
I
it?
think that's the one. Yeah, I can never remember.
Something
I
like
just
that.
remember going to a ton of them and forgot what they're called.
Yes,
But
exactly.
yeah. So you said that you emailed Todd Howard and he got back to you, or you spoke to the guy and then he told you to get in contact with Todd Howard. That first job designing the Raider, I know you made a video at this on your channel, which I'll link below as well. But could you talk us through that process and how nervous were you for that first job with Bethesda? I suppose it was a
Um,
trial more than a job, wasn't it?
yeah, it was more of a trial. But once I heard back from Todd, that moment that I heard back from Todd and he said, we want to send you an art test, I knew I would get the job because I was going to put everything I had into that art test.
Yeah.
And, I lacked a lot of know-how at the time. I still lack a lot of know-how when it comes to games. I do think I'm one of the more technologically inept game developers out there because my focus is art, and
Yeah.
that's what I've kind of chosen to double down on. And so they didn't have a lot of specifications for how this radar should have to be made. And so the idea was just make it as good as you can, as fast as you can. And I was 22 years old, fresh out of college. I had nothing better to do than to just spend all day and all night on this art asset. And so there was still huge gaps in my ability to create. it. There's just lots of detail and lots of little things that I wasn't equipped. I wasn't fast enough at it. But I knew that if I could fabricate a character who made an emotional impact on the audience, aka Todd Howard, I would have the job. If I could create somebody where it's a character that seemed believable, that seemed real, not necessarily photoreal, but their personality seemed real. I just felt like that's how you make an impact on people, is through the emotion. And so I was nervous, but I was more excited, and I was thrilled when I actually got to do the in-person interview there. I was much more nervous when I finally just got there, because then I was, put face to face with the real workflows there, and quickly realized there was whole areas where I was totally inept, and totally a newbie. And so, yes, I remember there being a couple months at the beginning, really shaky months, where I was making assets for Shivering Isles, but I could do the sculpting and I could do the low poly modeling and all this stuff, but texturing was just beyond me. I couldn't figure it out. Um, I was supposed to do Sheogroth's outfit, and I think I did the model, but I couldn't texture it. I don't know. I just couldn't. Yeah. So it was a little nerve-wracking there for a while, but I eventually caught on.
Oh, nice. That's the
Yeah.
main thing. You got your foot in the door. But yeah, I can imagine when you're going from that workflow of I just need to impress, so I'm going to do everything I can, to suddenly a structured thing. It's suddenly you're in a different world suddenly.
Yes. Yes. You're part of a pipeline, and people are depending on you, and suddenly you realize, oh, I can't do this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, so we'll start with Fallout, because I know you've done quite a few videos, especially when the TV series came out, talking about your designs and everything like that. What was your sort of design process of the creatures? Did you have inspirations towards them? I know a few were in, obviously, the previous games, but you're going from 2D to suddenly 3D. So did you have inspirations that you brought to it? You can start, I don't know, Mirelurks, Super Mutants, Deathclaws, whatever you want to start with, really.
Yeah, sure. I definitely had a lot of my own references. I was still getting my bearings as a new artist, at a game company, because I was just about a year in, to my tenure at Bethesda, and so I was starting to hit my stride a little bit more, but I still had a long way to go. So I took a lot of direction from the art director, and a lot of direction from the concept artist Adam Adamowicz, who was just pretty brilliant, it seemed to me. And I tried to stay as faithful as I could to the originals, because especially in Fallout 3, when I remember X-Men 3, it was a new director from X-Men 2, and they kind of immediately killed off Professor X and Cyclops. They even killed Cyclops off screen. And I thought to myself, I don't even care about the X-Men that much. I was imagining accosting the director and just being like, who do you think you are?
Yeah.
Like, you just got this and you're killing off who do you think you are? Like, you're not worthy to do that, And so I think that when it came to Fallout 3, coming on the heels of Fallout 1 and 2, like, you have to do your best to show that you can handle the material with care. You haven't yet earned the right to go off and do your own thing. You have to demonstrate that you are appreciative and honoring that which came before. So I think, but with that said, when we're talking about assets that are, 8 pixels tall, you do have a little bit of like flexibility.
Yeah.
And so I would look at concept art as much as possible. I look at the original art as much as possible. And then I would basically try to look at the real world as much as possible. A lot of, I made the rad roaches, the rad scorpions, the giant ants. These are giant insects. So I was looking at real insects as much as possible, because the idea of fantasy is you want it to appear convincing. So you want to make fantasy that looks totally convincing. And so I did a lot of looking at the real world for that. And even characters like the Deathclaw, I was looking at elephants, rhinos, dinosaurs, lizards, that kind of thing, just trying to figure out how to combine all these aspects to make something that looked like a chimera, a mix of creatures, which is what the Deathclaw is. It's a hybrid. And so, yeah, it definitely depended on, per asset? What was I creating? But as I did with the Raider, my first question that I always asked was, what do I want people to feel when
Yeah.
they see this? And what's the personality behind this entity? And so one of my favorite entities to create were the Fallout 3 ghouls. And I just loved making them because they were horrible, they were disgusting, they were nasty, but I wanted them to inspire revulsion and also pity.
Mm.
They look starving, like they're not thriving out there in the waste, they're starving. And I even came up with this bit of lore just for myself that, maybe their eyelids had fallen off, 150 years ago, and so they just like can't sleep really, which is why they're often in subway tunnels and dark places like that, where maybe they can kind of catch a few winks. Um, but I felt bad for them, and that's why they're missing a bunch of teeth. They have these big bulbous heads. They have these kind of bulging eye sockets, bulging eyes, and so, I think it's really tempting. And I think we see a lot in video games of characters that are just evil.
Mm.
Like they're just evil. Ooh, they just want to eat you. Like, ooh, they're so bad.
Yeah.
And it's just like that to me. That's just lazy, because there is no such thing as an evil creature in the real world. There's just, I mean, just humans we're the most evil things we can think of. And even we have to like kind of generally have reasons to have come to the place where we're now committing evil acts.
Yeah.
So I wanted to handle them with empathy and things like that. So yeah, exactly. Again, it depended on the creature and the impact I was trying to leave on the player. But I think creating a specific feeling for each one was definitely a major driver.
That's really interesting, the stuff about the ghoul, because I was playing through New Vegas the other day, and I know it's not Fallout 3, but it uses the same models pretty much. And I found that the ghouls absolutely terrified me in that one because, I mean, 4 as well, you got some really creepy moments, but in 3, you get, especially when you get into VATS and you get a close up of its face, there is something so horrifying about that. You can see that they were once human, and
Yes.
they're just drained of all of that. And
Yes.
so it's really, and I love that bit of lore that you said about how they're always in dark spaces because they can't sleep essentially, and they want to,
Yeah.
because that's where most of the time they're lying down, and then they wake up and stuff is under something or in a tunnel, like you say. So I love that bit of self-made lore, I suppose.
I even had them. I even asked Gary, the same Gary that got me the job,
Good old
the
Gary.
animator.
Yeah.
I even asked him to provide little what's it called? Seizure animations. So if you sneak up on ghouls in Fallout 3 or New Vegas, you might see occasionally they're just standing there minding their own business, and then they kind of just tense up and they kind of shiver for a minute. They are having these like mini seizures. Yeah, because I want people to feel bad for them, and I want it to make it very clear that their brains have just been these poor people have just been scrambled, in a horrible way.
That's incredible. Yeah, I have noticed that they do like script. I had no idea, but that's so cool. We have to play it again now just to see that happen. When it came to like the super mutants as well, did you have that similar thing that you wanted to kind of feel bad for them, or are they meant to be like walking tanks and everything like that?
So I only made the super mutant, what is it? Overlords, I think they're called.
Oh yeah.
I did not make the normal super mutants. That was a woman named Hulai.
Mm.
They obviously went a different direction with those than with Fallout 1 and 2. It's not necessarily the direction I would have taken, but I think it was unique and it inspired me on some aspects of the feral ghouls. For instance, the translucent skin.
Yeah.
So I didn't create them. I did create their armor. I created their armor. I created the armor for the super mutant behemoth, and I did create the super mutant overlords. But I did not create the super mutants for Fallout 3. But I did create them for Fallout 4.
Oh, right. So actually, it leads me on to my next sort of question. There was a somewhat transition in art, a difference in art style from 3 to 4. Did you have more creative control about what you wanted from some things? Because I know the ghouls, for example, look quite different from 3 to 4. So did you play a part in like different ideas, or was that sort of out of your hands?
It was sort of out of my hands. It's a mixed answer because essentially, after Skyrim was released, I worked very, very little on the DLCs because I was moved ahead of the rest of the project to go to then team up with the art director for Fallout 4 to try to create some assets beforehand that would kind of provide some kind of like example of what the art style would be. So I did, in that sense, I did get a lot of influence at the beginning, at the offshoot, and at the offset. And when I was creating creatures for that game, including the Deathclaws and the Bloodbugs and the Mirelurks and the Mole Rats and the Super Mutants and the Mirelurk Kings, um, I had very little input. I'm sorry, that's not true. I had very little oversight
Yeah.
in creating them. And I think at that point, after 7 years at Bethesda, I was well trusted. Everyone had no problem with me taking a concept and then kind of going off script, like taking the concept, taking things I liked out of it, and then just going off script and creating my own thing. That's kind of one thing I did a lot of while I was there, is like using the reference art as inspiration, but kind of refusing to be somebody whose job was to translate 2D to 3D. I wanted to be more than a cog in a machine. I wanted to have lots of creative input.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of creative control and freedom at the outset of that. But the reason I kind of pulled back on that also is that I left 9 months later. And so a lot of, so production continued without me and without any of my input. And so I think if I were to guess about, for instance, the Fallout 4 ghouls, which are not my favorite. I know the artist who did it. He's an amazingly talented guy, but they're not my favorite. And I think part of that comes down to the question of personality. Their personality doesn't shine through in the same way. With that said, they have amazing animations and things like that. And this is just my opinion, of course, but I believe that the aesthetic for that was based on a creature that I made, which you may have heard about, called the Maypole, which is this like, towering, glowing one. And he's melting like candle wax. And I think that may have inspired the look of the feral ghouls after I left, but I really couldn't tell you. So yeah, so in conclusion, I was able to add a lot of my own flavor and sauce into the creatures I made for Fallout 4, but then I left and I never had any more input ever again. And so yeah.
I never like to discredit anyone's style and everything like that, but I'd certainly say that when seeing the ghouls for the first time in 4, I was like, oh, that's a bit of a shame they're suddenly puffier than they were in 3. And I'm not just saying that because you're on the call now, but I genuinely did like the ghouls from 3 and thought it was a sudden change to 4. But I know a few people thought the same with other things as well in that game.
Of course, and everyone's opinions are very valid. And I think there's a nice I don't know if you remember the scene in RoboCop where the guy gets sewage, a toxic waste dumped on him and he starts melting. And I mean, that's the Fallout 4 ghouls, right? Like they definitely get that aesthetic across. But yes, when I looked at like the model and I was just looking at like the eyes don't have like personality in them. They're kind of like these slits kind of, and you can't really, and for me, like the eyes are the windows to the soul, and so I think, it's one of those small differences that, bothered me. But again, this is all personal taste, and you're also talking to somebody who feels intense ownership.
Yeah, of course.
Or entitled or otherwise, and so and like I said, I know the guy who made it, and he's immensely talented. I mean, he could do concept art. He did so many assets that blow things out of the water. And for instance, he took my super mutants. I made the super mutants, and then I left, and I told him on the way out, I was like, hey man, like, as the game takes shape and the engine changes, like there might need some texture tweaks done to these things. Can you handle my models? And he said yes, and he did. And like the super mutants, like he added this like very subtle like speckling of like pink in the green, and he just raised the bar of my textures on that. And so this is my opinion of their Fallout 4 ghouls has nothing to do with the talents of this individual, because they're awesome.
No, of course. Exactly.
Yeah.
So with that said, obviously you worked for a good while on the Fallout stuff. Do you find it weird that so many people recognize these things that you've got, like the TV show showed the glimpse of the Deathclaw skull. So we're going to see that probably next year or whenever it comes out. Do you find that exciting, seeing that your sort of stuff is being beloved by people? How's that feel for you?
Oh, it feels so good. It feels so good. I am very, you know, I will say, I felt a very, I felt a really good feeling watching the show
Mhm.
because I felt respected. Like I
Yeah.
felt like the people who made the show, they weren't just starting from scratch and going in their own direction. It just felt like they were fans of the games, and that they were really doing justice and honor to our work, and it felt so good, like just to see all these things almost taken directly from the games, you know, like and brought directly into the show, and to see just how perfectly it worked. No, I felt very respected by the people who made that show. And you know, the thing I'm excited about most, obviously, is the Deathclaw, and a big reason for that is because the Deathclaw is right the apex predator of the Fallout universe,
Yeah.
and I got to make them for Fallout 3 and Fallout 4. But the exciting thing for me is that when I was leaving Bethesda just a couple months to go, there were no plans to make the Deathclaw for Fallout 4. Now, maybe they had intentions to do so, and it was just such an obvious addition that they hadn't added it to the monster list, but it wasn't on the list, and so I think I asked to do it and they declined, and so then they said, you know, we don't even know if we need one, so then I just made it at home. And
Nice.
I didn't look at I mean, I looked at reference from Fallout 1 and 2 again, because you always have to touch base with where, you know, where you came from.
Mhm.
And I looked at the concept art that Adam had made for the Fallout 3 Deathclaws. But basically at that point, you know, I've been there for 7 years. I felt like, you know what, this is my chance to do an all Jonah Loeb production. You know, this is like top to bottom. This is my thing. And so I added armor, you know, so that it would actually look like it could absorb a lot of, like, you know, um, small caliber gunfire, etc. I changed the shape of the skull, you know, taking what had come before and just really iterating on it. You know, when I had made the Fallout 3 Deathclaw, I was a newbie artist. When I made the Fallout 4 Deathclaw, I was at the top of my game. And this was like my passion project. And so what I'm really excited about is when I saw that Deathclaw skull at the end of season 1, I said, that's my Fallout 4 Deathclaw. Like
Yeah.
you look at the curve of the horns and the shape of the skull, and I'm like, that's my Fallout 4 Deathclaw. And it feels like mine, like more than anything else I've made at Bethesda. Like that's like, you know, it feels very personal. And so they've confirmed there's Deathclaws in season 2, and they're going to do them justice in some form or other. I hope they do my Fallout 4 Deathclaw, because in my opinion, and I would say in my humble opinion, but this is not humble, but in my opinion, after working as a character artist for 7 years and treasuring this IP and doing all I can to add to it, I think it's the best Deathclaw.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think I'm just gonna like and I think that because it's like I didn't just go off on my own and invent something new. I stuck to what everybody knows, you know, the fundamentals of the aesthetic. And so again, you know, I did my best to honor everything that came before in the creation of that, while also trying to upgrade the design. And people are certainly entitled to like the Fallout 3 versions more, or the Fallout 4 versions. There's aspects of the Fallout 3 versions, especially the way they attack in the games, that is far more deadly.
Mm.
I made them look kind of more skeletal in both their body and their face. You know, there's creepy aspects to that. But in my mind, the Fallout 4 Deathclaw is the best thing I ever made. And if anyone thinks, you know, if anyone at the show thinks they're gonna, you know, improve on it, I don't know. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. There's lots of things I've made in my career that can be improved on in any number of ways, but I'm like, that one, that's my baby. Like that's
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, yeah.
That's great. I was thinking when you were saying about it, for me, there's some designs in Fallout 4 that I'm like, yeah, I'm not on board with personally. But when it came to the Deathclaw, I always felt like it was a nice evolution from three's one, and sort of it was bigger, bulkier, and I know you see it very early on in the game, but when you do see it, you're like, oh my god,
Yeah.
that was quick, and it's huge, especially considering you're in power armor when you see it, and it's still massive, which I don't feel like you got that same energy with other games. They were big, but they weren't as towering, like Godzilla coming out of the floor.
Yeah,
So
it's
yeah.
a big boy. It's very lanky, and so like even when it's walking around, it's very hunched over, but you see that thing when it stands up. I mean, it's like 11 feet tall. It's just
Yeah.
when it stretches up to its full height. And one of the things I love about it is, and I took inspiration from my friend Dennis. He made the werewolf for Skyrim,
Yeah.
and he made it with like this tall back and these long arms. And so I went the same direction. I got these long arms, and so when it's walking, you're kind of seeing it with its arms by its side. And the moment it goes into attack pose, its arms flare out,
Mm.
and you see, oh my God, this thing's wingspan is insane.
Yeah.
Which it should feel insane because it's the
Yeah,
Deathclaw, you
exactly.
know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
if it's not the biggest thing in the game, then something's wrong.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And when those claws come out, those claws of death come out, you should be like, oh, I understand why it's called that. Okay, I get it.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's perfect. I think it's a fantastic design, and I can
Thank you.
imagine, I can see why you're so passionate about it, coming from seeing where it was in Fallout 1, 2, working on it on 3, and then yeah, of course 4. So then
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, sorry. So then you came to Skyrim, and
Mhm.
obviously you worked on Oblivion as well, and that's quite a, there was a change in art style as well. Did you play a part in that change in art style again, or was that sort of just the way it evolves? Because I suppose Morrowind was different to Oblivion, which was a different to Skyrim. So was that part of the natural process of evolving as a title?
Yeah, it was part of the natural process. A lot of it was handed down from above. I thought it was a great idea. So Morrowind took place. It was this weird world of the Dunmer, um, aka the Dark Elves, a very strange world with big giant insect creatures and chitin armor and a very strange tribal society. And then Oblivion, part of the reason it felt um, unoriginal to me was because it took place in the capital of Tamriel,
Mhm.
which is controlled by the Imperials, which are very similar in many ways to like the Romans or something like that.
Yeah.
Where so the land where it took place was this more centralized government area, and so you have this more kind of traditional fantasy aesthetic. Then when we went to Skyrim, literally go to Skyrim, like the continent of Skyrim, now we're talking about the Nords,
Mhm.
and we're talking about essentially barbarians and Vikings. And so there was a very strong pull from the very beginning where it's like we're no longer referencing those imperial vibes. Specifically we're referencing this Viking-esque world where we're looking at Viking legends, we're looking at Nordic art, that kind of thing as inspiration. And so that was certainly a huge part of it, and part of the direction. And so I certainly can't claim to have a direct influence over that course,
Mm.
though I was very happy that we were doing something that was not so generic, that actually had roots in kind of the real world, real world, and roots in a particular culture and history. With that said, when I created the various armors I created, like dragon bone armor and dragon scale armor, the ancient Nord armor, which is worn by the Draugr. Um, I wanted to create this feeling that these were not, that these were forged armor, not even made from steel, but made from iron, like really heavy,
Mm.
thick plates of iron. And so everywhere in the game, virtually, except for the steel armor, where you see the hammered uh, metal texture, that's usually me creating. And then what I wanted to do is create this feeling of like, this is not cutting edge tech. Like
Yeah.
this is old world tech. This is, right after Bronze Age kind of level of tech where they are really hammering out these huge pieces of iron. And so you got, again, you can look at the mask up there, but you can see that like kind of pebbled look to it.
Yeah.
So there were definitely aspects where I was trying to add in my own cultural aspects in there and give a sense of what the ancient Nords were like. The ancient Nords were basically Conan and Red Sonja, basically,
Yeah.
and something I loved about the old Conan movie with Schwarzenegger was it had a lot of kind of Eastern references. It had a lot of like Nordic references in terms of the art style, and it all felt handmade,
Mm.
culturally significant, and definitely old world. And so everything I created in that game, I tried to imbue with a sense of that handmade quality. And again, that's where we come up with that kind of hammered texture for the
Mm.
metal. All my my leathers are hand sewn, in some cases quite badly. Everything's kind of stained. Um, and I wanted everything to feel like it had a real history to it. Even the feet of the mammoth are cracked and caked with dirt, and the sides of their mouth have like literally like dried spit with like old like chewed up grass on it, that kind of thing. Where their eyes have those kind of like like kind of eye boogers that you see on elephants, like that
Yeah.
kind of thing. Where I want to create this feeling of like this is lived in, this is real, like you can practically smell it. So yeah, I wouldn't say I influenced the totality of that direction at all, but I did my darndest to convey that sense of realism, that time and that place and that culture.
That's awesome, because I spent a lot of time at the forge because I always like getting my smithing up so I could wear the top armor. And I always loved how brutal the armor looked, especially later on when you got like the ebony gear. I just thought it looked so powerful that
Yeah.
you just had to play it in third person just to see what you're wearing at all times. So I love that that was your inspiration of got to make it look, like this brutal world that they live in where it's cold and everything wants to kill you. Uh, and yeah, so I love that that comes through. And I was going to say, because I keep looking at the dragon behind you, and you were responsible for some of the dragon designs, or was it all of them?
I did all of the dragons in the base game, yes.
Yeah.
And so there's obviously concept art for all of them, which helped me figure out the direction. For the base dragon, there's something like 32 different sketches to choose from. And you can look through them all online on Adam's portfolio, which they uploaded to Flickr. None of them really look like the dragon we know, because I had to take aspects from a whole bunch of them and try to combine them into one dragon. And then once that was made, then the concept art for Alduin and Parthenax was used, kind of using my model as a base. So then the concept art becomes much more similar to what I created in game because they're using my in-game asset as a base to paint over.
Yeah.
But yeah, I had a lot. I can't say I had a lot of influence over the look of the dragons. I also had there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. I was still relatively new. I'd done one AAA title all the way through Fallout 3. I was still relatively new as an artist. And so even though I'd proven my merit and I'd proven my artistic ability, I was still fairly junior. And so a lot of people were giving input throughout. So as much as I say I had a lot of influence over the look of the dragon because I made the model and I did all the texturing and I spent months and months and months on it, lots of people were ultimately involved in something that big. And then with something like Alduin, the concept art was great. He had this great, insane look on his face, which I really accentuated in the final art. And I wanted to make him look like, to me, the concept art looked like he was like black pitted iron, like he
Mm.
was a meteorite, basically. And so that really that informed my decision making going forward. And then with other things like Odoving, I tried to reference like Kawasaki motorcycles in terms of like the style and look and the sleekness of it, because he was the
Nice.
one you were going to ride. So I was like, all right, he should be cool.
Yeah.
He should be fun.
That's
Yeah.
so awesome. I love that everything that you make has like its own little lore. I think that's something that I love about this conversation with you is hearing those little snippets about why you wanted it to look a certain way, that either is cultural or, this is the king of the dragons, I suppose. He needs to look like he's otherworldly and brutal in nature. So I
Yeah.
love that everything's got lore behind it to some extent.
Well, when you spend like a month plus on a creature, you want to really think through like all the aspects of it. And I'm a storyteller and a world builder at heart, and there's just not a lot that's the way I get story across. Is I create a lot of implied storytelling. I had even thought about one point, and I pitched it to the art director, and he was even open to it. And ultimately, I don't know why I didn't do it. Maybe I just ran out of time. But I was even thinking of having the hands of all the jogger like a dark maroon, like red, and like
Mm.
the idea of like after they were dead, their hands were like dipped in like lamb blood or something like that, just like as some kind of weird sacramental whatever.
Yeah.
Lots of little details like that where like it's unclear exactly what this detail is, but there's a story there.
Mm.
Like with the dragon priest masks. That was just an idea that my friend Joel had. He didn't have an idea for the masks, but he knew that he wanted to make dragon priests that were special, that were different, that stood out. And I went back to my Morrowind days and I thought back about the Ordinator armor and other masks that you could acquire. And I thought, there's no masks in Skyrim. Let's make some masks. And so, with the wooden one and the other ones, again, like there's no exact, they're dragon priests, so there's no real explanation for why they look exactly the way they do. But I wanted that to be uncertain. I wanted you to wonder. I think that's why I like fantasy more than sci-fi. In this instance, is that fantasy has like cultural, mystical, magical wonder to it. And when you find an old sword in a treasure chest at the bottom of a dungeon, there's a story there. Like somebody wielded that sword at some point. It was made by some smith somewhere who worshipped some god who made it for some king. And now it's down there and you found it. And, does it have like an eagle crest? Is it imbued with geometric patterns? Like what's the story behind it? And I love creating art assets where you can see there's a lot of detail, but a lot of it is almost like washed away over time. Like it's rust, everything I make has like a little bit of rust or whatever. Like it's
got to be used.
Tarnish.
Yeah.
It's got to be used. It's got to feel real because then it feels like a real relic. It's not this like, a stainless steel thing that's been kept in styrofoam for like the last 3,000 years. It's old, but it's still got it,
Yeah.
Like me, old, but still got it.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah. So, yeah, it's so good to hear that because that's one of the reasons why I love getting into lore and everything like that. Picking up a sword and thinking, what is the story behind that? So it's so nice to hear it from someone who designs it, and they're not just going, "I wanted a nice looking sword for this character." It's like, well, why would they have that sword? So
I just see so many spectacular looking, ultra intricate swords and armors and in all kinds of fantasy media and all that, and oftentimes there's not enough thought into like, well, how is it really made? Like what were the budgets? How much gold was this guy paid to make this? Because you can make a really awesome looking sword that looks like it was made with like 10 gold. It's almost unadorned or whatever, but you can make it look cool. That's that implied storytelling, my jam.
That's great. I love to hear it. So we'll sort of wrap up the Skyrim stuff. I know that you said in Fallout that your favorite thing was was the Deathclaw, and the most proudest thing. Do you have a favorite thing about Skyrim or Oblivion like that really stands out to you?
Yeah, I made the giants look like my father, so the giants are a personal favorite.
It's amazing.
I love the Draugr. I think there's a lot of ways that you can do undead, but I love the shrunken, mummified beef jerky aesthetic that the concept artist had come up with. I just really liked following that through. And so even though they're undead and you would expect them to be shambling, they're composed of a lot more rigid, straight lines, very boxy shapes, meant to convey almost like a soldierliness, aspect to them. And I was really pleased with how they came out and how they look in the game. And you fight them all the time, so what's more important, like the level 99 final boss look or the level 3 character monster that you fight all the time. And so I was really pleased with the Draugr. The armors were really fun. They're a nice detour. I enjoy making little art assets that just took a couple days each, like the Sanguine Rose, the Wabbajack, the circlets. We didn't have any circlets in the game, and I just was like, well, what this feels like a waste. I want to add more.
Yeah.
I wish I'd had more time to add more. I would have added like leather ones and whatever.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, the Dragon Priest masks, again, they weren't supposed to be in the game. They're just my friend's idea. So, and they're now one of the most like cosplayed things about Skyrim, that feels very personal and fun.
They're fantastic. So, yeah.
Yeah, thank you. There, I referenced West African masks. In fact, you can see the one I'm referencing right here.
Yeah, I was
Look
gonna
at look at
say.
the look at the eyes. Look at the eyes. You know, it's they're very very similar. And yeah, so the Draugr, the Dragon Priest masks, the Giants, Alduin certainly. Um, I think those are most of them. And I think I really enjoyed making the Draugur's armor as well. I think that was super fun to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, yeah.
Sounds like it was an absolute blast to just work on. Full stop, to be honest.
It was so fun. It was
Yeah.
so fun. And again, like with the concept art, there was for the Draugr, there was dozens of pictures, and none of them quite captured everything. And especially the armor was just a hodgepodge of different ideas because the concept artist Adam Adamowicz would generate all kinds of images, but he had a very loose, scribbly style.
Mm.
So it kind of invited, like you almost had no choice but to go off script because he was not giving you these perfect orthoscopic images. You know, at least I didn't want them. You know, it was always, and that, you know, that was the kind of thing that freaked me out during my first couple months of employment there, where I was like, I don't know, he's doing all this scribbling. I can't. There's no details. Like, what am I supposed to do? Like, and then over time, I was like, oh no, this is an invitation. This is an opportunity. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
yeah,
perfect. So he gave you creative rights basically, but was just like, here's the basics. Do what you
yeah.
want.
Exactly, exactly. And I think what made him happier more than anything was not that when people did what he had drawn perfectly, it was when he made a drawing and it inspired other people to do other things. So,
That's
yeah,
amazing. That's great to work
yeah.
under someone like that, really.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
so you said that you left Bethesda. Was it just after Fallout 4 that started production, or you were working on it
During yeah,
during? Yeah,
during Fallout 4, right around the time that the rest of the team was finishing up the DLCs is when I left.
yeah,
And so when by the time the rest of the team moved on to Fallout 4, I'd done you know, a Preston Garvey's outfit, the Deathclaws, some chrome statuary, the Mirelurks, the Bloodbugs, the Mole Rats, the Super Mutants, and then when I left, I just did one contract job, and that was the Mirelurk King.
nice,
Um, and so, but yeah, so I kind of left like basically 9 months in. Yeah.
nice. And then I guess you worked on the Marvel thing. So how did you get to this point where you've started your own graphic novel and your passion project? I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of different routes, a lot of different directions. I was always envious of the concept artists for creating these scenes and creating ideas. You know, being a 3D artist was a blast, and you get to create these things that people fight in the game, but you're creating these isolated things by themselves. You know, they're inanimate puppets, you know, when you're working on them, and they have no story outside of what they are. Their only context, you know, happens when they're actually put into the game by animators, etc. So I really wanted that power for my own.
Yeah.
And so I started moving more into the direction of drawing and painting afterwards. Started doing some Twitch streaming and getting some following there. Ended up being hired by Adobe to do some streaming for them. And then eventually I worked on a game for them that was never released. I worked on an indie game that also was never released.
Yeah.
I worked on a novel that also was never released.
It's such a shame.
And yeah, I mean, but this is how, you know, the freelance world goes. Is,
Yeah.
you know, and a lot of jobs is like there's, you know, people, you know, they say the road to success is paved with failure. You know,
Mm.
that is totally the case. Um, and I got tons of failure, baby.
Don't we all though? Don't we all?
Yeah, exactly. Haven't we all? It's like it's the human experience.
Yeah.
And I had drawn images of this little skeleton before. He just kind of cropped up one day during a live stream. I started painting a drawing of him, painting a painting of him. And then I did a couple more iterations of this little character in different drawings because I started doing these ink drawings, and I would ask my Instagram audience for a word, and we would do a word of the day series, and they would give me a word, and I would try to illustrate that word in a unique and unusual way over the course of that one single day. And I'd post my progress, and then I'd post the final image. And that, you know, for me, the purpose of that was to accumulate a good audience on Instagram and, you know, get my following noticed more, and to push myself out of my comfort zone and engage in black and white compositions. And
Mm.
that taught me a lot. But I started creating this little skeleton character, And in the summer of 2020, which was a pretty terrible summer, um, I kind of realized that, like, a lot of the monster making and the horror aspects and all that stuff that I was so good at making was not what people wanted at that time. It was not really the mood du jour. And so I put a lot of effort. So I started thinking about other ways in which to kind of make an impact, or try to come up with a response to that. And so I kind of started to conceive of this almost fairy tale bedtime kind of idea of, and I made this series of 12 panels called The Story of Quiet. And this was the story of this cute little skeleton on this little journey. And it was very whimsical and very cute. And I would basically tell the story, and you would see the picture come together over the course of a minute, in an Instagram video.
Yeah.
And the result, the response was kind of amazing, actually. People were like, "Oh my God, I'd like love this skeleton. Like, I would die for the skeleton." And other people were like, commenting like, "Why am I crying right now? Like, what's going on?"
You've
And
hit
so
gold there.
yeah, exactly. Then I was like, I think I've hit on something here. And so I had the idea kind of planted in my head. I was like, well, maybe there's legs here. And then because of the work I'd done on Skyrim and Fallout, and because I'd managed to get my social media visibility up to a certain point, that's how the editor at Insight Editions found me. And it had been his idea to do Marvel Anatomy, and he'd already gotten a manuscript written, approved by Marvel. They had everything in place except for an illustrator. And because I had been focusing on monsters and characters for so long, I had a very powerful, relatively powerful understanding of anatomy, and that's how I got Marvel Anatomy. So everything else kind of fell to the wayside after that. Is I just worked on that for a really frenzied year and a half, just trying to do my absolute darndest. Because it's a book with over 60 heroes and villains, and every one of them is someone's favorite. So I had to do the best possible job I could.
Good grief.
And so after that, I kind of was like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? And something that had kind of slowly been, I've been realizing is in this extremely corporate environment that we're in now, and which we've been in for a long time. But here I am. I've made iconic, lots of stuff for Fallout 3, Fallout 4, for Skyrim, and now for Marvel. And I'm so lucky and so privileged to have gotten to the point where I got to work on these things. But I realize I'm still broke, man. Like, these companies are making millions and billions of dollars, and my former bosses are just driving around in nice cars and all these things. And I realized this is not cool, man. Like, and I knew that, and I even knew I heard from the inside scoop that when Microsoft acquired Bethesda, the bonuses for people were no bueno. Like, they were not good. And then even more people left Bethesda, and I was like, I was just kind of tired of feeling disrespected by companies and not valued. I mean, listen, I promise I'm not complaining, but I guarantee you in season 2, when that Deathclaw shows up, it could look exactly like the Fallout 4 Deathclaw. It could kill a whole bunch of people, and my name will not be in those credits. I made that thing at home. I made that thing at home. I poured myself into that. Gaming Heads created a 2-foot tall Deathclaw sculpture that they are selling for thousands of dollars online. And they didn't, when I say created, I mean, they just took my art and printed it. That's all they did. That's all they did. I didn't get one thing from that. So if you can tell, I'm a little bitter. I'm like, I gave so much of myself to these franchises, and I'm glad I did. And I would, and I don't take it back at all. But would I do it? Would I continue to do it? I don't think so, because we're talking about big corporations where all the money flows right out to the top.
Yeah.
And not to the developers, And so, the same thing goes for Marvel. There's, if you don't want to illustrate for, Disney, well, then get out of the way. Lots of other people would,
Yeah.
And that's, I'm not going to sit here and rail against the corporate structure, because it is what it is. But I have made my decision that I need to take a break from that. And if I'm going to acquire any kind of real power out there in the world, I have to start my own thing. And so after Marvel Anatomy, I decided I don't want to get another job at another gaming house, because also, I mean, I'm never going to beat Skyrim, right? What am I going to do? Like spend my entire career trying to chase that
Yeah,
high?
yeah,
Like it's not going to happen.
yeah,
And so might as well just, go my own direction and just settle for much, 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 much smaller results, but they're my results,
yeah.
and so I came up with
It's-
Quiet level one. And again, it had been a project that had been simmering for a very long time. I was giving it lots of space and time to simmer because I knew there was something there, but I couldn't grab it too quickly.
mm,
I needed for the project and for the characters and everything to find me. And I feel very certain now that whether or not this makes it big, and I think you can argue already that on Kickstarter in the last week, since it launched, it is already pretty big. It's already, I'm already quite happy with how it's going. But whether or not this actually, becomes a show, becomes a video game, becomes a movie, all these things, I have no doubt in my heart that this is the material. This is the kind of thing that people want to see. That this has the pedigree of a winner,
yeah,
and I just have to give it my all. I have to all the love and care and attention and world building that I put into Skyrim and Fallout and Marvel Anatomy and all these things, I'm pouring into this. And it will see a tiny fraction of the success of these other titles, but it will belong to me.
yeah.
And that feels really good. And so, yeah. And I think it channels a lot of my best abilities, art, darkness, monsters, drawing, but it's also really cute. It's also whimsical and it's full of heart. And I think that we live in a very cynical time. A lot of and there's just not a lot of there's not enough heart,
Yeah,
in media. And the ones that do have heart just always sail to the top for me. And so I feel, can I make it in the big time with this project? I don't know, but I feel very sure that this is exactly what I should be doing right now.
absolutely. I think it's so relatable what you're saying about the corporations and not feeling like you're actually respected at all. I mean, I worked tons of jobs before I sort of made this channel my career, and it's the proudest thing I've ever done is making this channel. So I can imagine how you must feel when you put something out there and people just respond immediately. I mean, the Kickstarter was phenomenal to watch. When it went up, within 30 minutes, it achieved its goal of, what was it, 15,000?
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And 30 minutes it was done. And I just thought that just shows that people want to support artists, want to support creatives. In a time
Yeah.
where AI is getting bigger, corporations are embracing it more. It's nice to see people go, yeah, I want this hand-drawn adventure. And the first thing I thought about when I saw Quiet was I loved Ori and the Blind Forest, and it gave off
Me too.
that similar vibe to me. It's that small character that's quite innocent, but in a big, dangerous world, and they've got to try and find their place in it. And so that's what I found from it. But when it comes to it, when you were drawing it and you put up the Kickstarter, what did that feel like? Were you, I imagine anxious is not too small a word to explain how you were feeling when that Kickstarter went live.
Yeah, good question, man. It was a journey. I mean, I was so sleep deprived. I was so sleep deprived. I'd been at Denver Comic Con, which is a 4-day con, and then I'd taken a red eye on Sunday night and arrived back in New York at 10:30 or 11 on Monday. And then I just worked, and I had not slept at all. The planes were frigid and the seats did not recline. Thank you. Shout out to Frontier Airlines. Thanks, Frontier Airlines. But they got there on time, so no big complaint. And then I just worked all day, and I was up till 3:30 that night working, and then I slept for 4 hours, and I got back up at 8:30 the next day, and just jammed on it until I could. My project manager was like basically, no, you have to make it live like right now, like we are out of time. So finally we launched it, and how did I feel? I was so exhausted. I was so overwhelmed. And I think when you picture a Kickstarter, you picture, hitting the publish button and then just leaning back and enjoying
Mm.
watching things come in. But that was not my experience. I had to, like the work didn't even slow down for even a second. It was like now there's like this to do and this to do and this to do and like get on it. And you cannot post fast enough,
Yeah.
but you also have to make sure your posts are perfect. And like, this is the one I have to send one tweet. Well, it's got to be the best tweet that people want to retweet, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm.
And I'm not one of these artists on Twitter that get like thousands of retweets. I get, 68, if it's a good thing. And so, um, and the Instagram algorithm, the Instagram algorithm loves when I post Marvel Anatomy, but when I post my private work, they're like, who dis? Like,
Yeah.
who are you?
Yeah.
No, thank you. We're all set. Um, once I my once my head was able to clear a little bit and I was able to like kind of watch it happen, it was pretty breathtaking and it was pretty amazing. And like it really showed me that, I've tried in the years since Bethesda, I've tried really hard to be out there, to make myself visible, to be interactive, whether on Twitch or Instagram or Twitter, or all these different, and then every Reddit post I ever make, I respond to like everybody. Every YouTube video I make, I respond to everybody.
Mm.
I want people to feel heard. I want people to feel seen. A lot of people are on their own personal journeys, and you know, I'm I'm just one random 40-year-old douchebag, pardon my language, who likes making art and who has gotten lucky in his life. But for a lot of people, because of what I've worked on, like I've made it, right? Like I've made
Mm.
it. It doesn't matter that like I have my own problems and I'm just some guy and I'm not sitting on a pile of money and I don't get to sit here and be like, I'm now forever the king,
Yeah.
I'm just some guy just struggling to make rent, with my
Mm.
wife and family. But to them, I've made it. And so I always have put a great emphasis on the importance of talking to everybody, giving everybody attention and giving everybody, answers to their questions. Anybody who emails me, I answer all their questions as much as possible, that kind of thing about, I want to do what you do. I want to do whatever. All of which is to say that when the Kickstarter launched and all these backers came in right away, as you say, within like 30 minutes, it got fully funded. It just felt like people had my back,
Yeah.
like normal people had come out of the woodwork to support me on day one. And it felt like, wow, like what you put out in the universe, like really does come back around, and I'm a big believer in that, like, I could leave this interview now and get hit by a bus on the way to the car, and that would be it for me. But my legacy is like who, the ripples of good and bad that I've tossed out into the world. And I just want the ripples of as many ripples of good as possible.
Yeah.
And when I had all those people backing me so early on, I was like, wow, like it felt really good because it felt like people had felt those ripples and people felt seen by me and wanted to return that favor. And I felt immensely touched. And as time goes on, it's been about just over 1 week now since the Kickstarter started. That feeling of gratitude is only increasing,
Yeah.
not because of the numbers keep going up, but because I'm able to kind of get my head out of my own ass more and more. And like kind of as I'm returning to like, from the sleep deprived, frenzied state,
Mm.
to more normal living, it's sinking in more and more like, wow, like I'm just some guy. And people have now put in almost $100,000 for me to realize my dream,
Yeah.
and at the end of and then it makes me feel extra excited because at the end of this process, I get to put a book in their hands.
Yeah.
And not just a book, I mean like a figurine, like a world map, like bookmarks, stickers, pins, like I get to Jonah Loeb get to make all the swag that like people get to like take home, and I get to make sure it's awesome. And like, I worked digitally for years, and so people got to play or experience my things on a screen, but now I get to put a book in people's hands, and so it feels really good. It
Yeah.
feels really good. And I'm hoping the numbers still keep going up because the costs associated with this kind of thing are prodigious. But honestly, I'm very happy and I'm very touched, and it feels really good to know that, as you just mentioned, building your own thing is what brought you the most pride,
Yeah.
right? And now I'm building my own thing. And, I wrote a novel years and years and years ago, and the gatekeepers and the publishing houses didn't accept it at the time. And that's fine because there really is only a limited number of slots in the publishing world. And
Yeah.
we are blessed to have actually a lot of amazing fantasy authors right now. Like they're doing such good work. And so like, I couldn't even take it that personally when I was rejected, because I was like, yeah, there's only like six yearly slots, for like a
Yeah.
good fantasy novel. And like everyone who's writing fantasy now is killing it. So like I
Mm.
get it. But here now I'm like, now I'm doing it all again. Now I'm going after my dream again. But this time it is already assured. Like it's already a sure thing. Like this is gonna be a thing. And so yeah, I don't know. It's a pretty great feeling. And I'm feeling very, very grateful. So if you're listening right now and you have supported the project, thank you so much, because I like you have made me a very happy man, and I promise you I will be delivering a product that you're gonna love and a character that you're gonna love. And if you haven't backed it yet, lots of time still.
Links are down
Hop
below.
on it.
Yeah,
Links down
absolutely.
below.
I
Yeah.
think what it speaks volumes, the fact that you're saying that you get to put something in people's hands, and yet you're sitting there with things that you've designed right behind you, which shows
Yeah.
how much you actually care about this project. Would you sort of to find come to the end of this interview and everything? Would you say you've evolved into, like, I don't know what the perfect way of saying this is, like all that experience has led to this point in your life where you can work on something that you want, and you can put everything you've experienced from working at Bethesda on Skyrim, Fallout, into this project? You understand what you want to do now?
Yeah, great question. And the answer is yes.
Mm.
It does. It feels, after 20 years in the industry and after a lot of great accomplishments and a lot of struggle and a lot of failure and a lot of trying this and a lot of trying that, it really does feel like it feels natural. It feels right. I learned so much working with all the talented people at Bethesda. I learned so much about what it takes to build a world, what the thought process is like, what it takes to build a project. I learned that from Todd Howard. Basically, how he structures, from the top down. What is the game? What is the experience? What are we selling? And what can we cut?
Mm.
I learned a great deal about art direction. I learned a great deal about creativity and concept art from Adam. I learned a lot about working by myself in the years since then, and the loneliness and isolation that's involved in creating things by yourself. Um, I've learned a lot about writing, from both the novel I wrote, other writing things I've done. I write all my YouTube content and all my Substack posts and all that. So I love that. I learned a great deal about storytelling and how to structure a story. I learned a lot about what it takes to pitch a project. Where do you start? How do you build it? That kind of thing. I've learned a lot about social media, how to build a following and how to keep it, how to involve people, how to involve your audience and have them feel committed. I've learned a lot about drawing, and I learned a lot about black and white art from my time doing those ink arts, the word of the day things. I've learned a lot about composition, and I've just in the last, year, I've learned a lot about sequential storytelling and how you do that. And it really does feel like the culmination of things. And that's why I kind of expressed to you a couple minutes ago that this feels right to
Mm.
me. Whether or not things explode in the way I want them to, I have no doubt at the moment that this is what I should be doing, because this is enormously personally fulfilling. And it does feel like the culmination of a lot of hard won lessons. Um, because the years since Bethesda have, you know, I've had a lot of amazing things happen and a lot of not amazing things happen, right? Like a
Mm.
lot of failure as well. And I think, I'm 41 now, going on 42, and that's no longer really young. That's kind of, I'm no longer a young man, I'm just a man,
Yeah.
and but I think that like I've fallen enough times that I can get back up. I have enough. I've walked this path in various iterations long enough now that I kind of understand the direction it's taking, and I'm really enjoying passing on everything I've learned, whether it has to do with art or storytelling or world building, etc., on my YouTube channel, on my Substack, etc. And it feels like this is the right time for this. And yeah. And I think the world, and I think this is the right time for Quiet. Honestly, I think that it's a project that I think people will connect with, and I feel pretty sure about that.
That's great to hear. So sort of to finalize, in a dream world, obviously it's doing fantastic on Kickstarter as it is. In a dream world, what would be your like perfect future for Quiet? Like, where would you want this to go if you could have everything you wanted?
I never let myself think too far ahead,
Yeah.
because I've had enough dreams dashed to bits.
Mm.
But no, but the honest answer is pretty straightforward. I want to make this graphic novel, and as I progress deeper into the making of this graphic novel, I mean, I've already gone a huge way, and now I just need to like basically like finish it. But I want to write a treatment for a show, and I think the next logical step would be like a 8-part, season one kind of, for, I think it's a strong narrative story. I think it lends itself to animation and storytelling really well. I'd love to see it on Amazon or Netflix or whatever. And my next, I think the next direction to go with it would be a show, a little cartoon show, not very big budget, pretty basic, I think. And then from there, a game, but I don't even know if I'd want to work on the game myself. I think I'd want to just entrust others to do a good job, because I want to keep working on the story and keep working on these graphic novels. The graphic novels themselves are gonna, in the media empire that I want to make of Quiet, they're the least lucrative aspect.
Yeah.
But they do become like the canon. They become like the Bible for how to structure the story and and what the characters are like, etc. So
Absolutely.
I had big dreams, but I gotta pace myself.
Yeah, I suppose you're like Quiet in this instance, where you're starting small in a big world, and you got to grow into it and see how it evolves. Really.
Exactly. I think Quiet is such an appealing character to me because they are so plainly outmatched by everything around them.
Yeah.
And I think, to me, that's ties in to a large degree as to why I think the world might want Quiet right now, is because I think a lot of us are feeling overwhelmed. I think a lot of us are feeling like we're outmatched by this world that is outpacing us and seems to feel nothing for us. I think a lot of us feel very small. Quiet has no voice. Quiet cannot speak. A lot of us feel voiceless, in the world, and a lot of us feel powerless. And so I think there's when you're creating really good fantasy, you can invent anything you want, but if it doesn't connect to like a real feelings that people have in the world, then it is fundamentally meaningless. It's fluff. There's a lot of fluffy, meaningless fantasy out there. And I think, I mean, yeah, we can all agree, right? There's just a lot of things that just aren't, they're just silly, new franchises, whatever. But I think, and there's a lot of things that do mean deep things and deliver incredible morals and lessons and things like that, or guides. And so I think that what I'm connecting with a lot on a personal level is that voicelessness, that powerlessness that Quiet has, and trying to just channel that kind of feeling of like, well, what Quiet can do is get back up and try again every time, and Quiet is outmatched by everything, but they are relentless. And so at this juncture right now, I'm kind of like, you know what, that's just what I have to be. And when I was even thinking about the in the lead up to the Kickstarter, and I was like feeling this intense anxiety, what's going to happen? What if it doesn't succeed? Blah, blah, blah. I thought to myself, well, what would Quiet do? And I was like, well, Quiet would just go for it.
Yeah.
Quiet would just try anyway, because like Quiet has no choice, because this is what Quiet has to do. And so I even had one of my fans, I expressed that nervousness about a week beforehand. I said all those things out loud on Twitter, and then someone sent me back a cartoon of me saying these things, and then Quiet being like, "Yeah, but that's why you should do it anyway."
I
And I was
remember
like, "Oh my
seeing
gosh,
it.
that's amazing!" Yeah, you saw it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
amazing.
fantastic. That. Yeah.
It was so fantastic, and it was such like it was like, wow, this is not even, I haven't even launched the Kickstarter yet, and people are already, they already get the soul of this character. So that's a pretty beautiful thing. So yeah, I'm excited about this next year, because it really feels like my future is, with regards to this project, is now kind of been set. And obviously some things are changeable depending on how many other people back the project, because then things can be expanded and improved, et cetera, et cetera. But one thing I'm working on right now is the world map. The whole story takes place on a tree of worlds, which is like level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, and every level has its own world.
Nice.
And as I plan out the world map, I'm realizing now that I am planning out the story of Quiet, and in doing that, I am planning out the story of my life for the next who knows how long. So it's quite a surreal experience.
Hopefully it will keep going for a long time. So I wish you all the best with it. And if anyone, as we mentioned earlier, if anyone is listening and they haven't, or they are backing it, as Jen says, thank you. And if you haven't yet, do check out the link below. Watch the video, because the video really got me. The music was beautiful, by the way. I don't know who you got to do the music or anything, but it was so perfect for the little trailer.
It was really good. It was really good. I did not pick it. It's funny. I picked out like 6 different tracks that I thought would be good, and I sent it to my friend Tony, who is the video editor for that. He's somebody I've known since high school, and he mocked up like 6 different really, really quick and dirty videos to the different musics, and he asked me which musics I like. I picked 3 of them, and he was like, "Wow, none of them were the ones that I picked." And I said, "Well, you know what? Then go with the one that you picked, because you're the video editor." And so he nailed it. You're totally right. He nailed it.
That's so funny.
Thank you, and thanks for watching. Yeah,
I want to hear the other ones. So, but yeah, if you haven't seen the Kickstarter, go click the link below and check it out and support it all you can. It's a great little story. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been so nice to talk to you about Fallout, Skyrim, Oblivion, Morrowind. Everything you've worked on. It's been so nice to get an insight into you. I know we speak on Twitter, but it's been so interesting to hear the lore behind your designs and everything like that, and your new project, of course. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me on here. It was a pleasure sharing this journey with you.
It's been brilliant. So thank you all for listening. Links to everything will be down below. And until we speak again, thank you for listening once again. And thank you, Jonah, for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Take care.